Ross Atkins has awoken from a long hibernation, which has lasted about an entire season here. And a report has come out that the Blue Jays need to extend Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and they're going to work heaven and earth to go ahead and make that happen. But what's been a rough season for the Blue Jays, one constant has been Vladimir Guerrero Jr., so they need to get that done, and they're working on it. So we'll break that down and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. Welcome, everybody, to Jays Digest. I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. And Nick, we got some interesting news coming out from a Blue Jays reporter, Schneider as well, who is one of the more notable ones, talking about a Vladdy extension. And we've been kicking this thing around. We're wondering when it's going to get done. And the Blue Jays will have a head start on everybody before Vladdy hits free agency after next season. So they got to be active as soon as the time comes that they got to go ahead and get this thing done. And Vladdy is very important to them competing next year and the years after that as well. I know that he's had some down seasons and he hasn't exactly stepped it up when he's needed to the most in the playoffs, but they need to keep him because the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And multiple reports are indicating that they're going to get it done, that they want to get it done, and that it's only a matter of time before it does actually happen.
Yeah, reports, we've been covering a lot of them, even dating back to 3-4 weeks ago. Schneider doesn't speak too much throughout the regular season, but when he does, you may as well pay very close attention because, like you mentioned, he's probably the most notable Blue Jays reporter alongside Ben Nicholson-Smith, and he was on an ATL podcast, and he said, quote, when being asked about Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s future in Toronto, I expect them to be proactive in October to see if they can get something done with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. before the market opens up in free agency. And that's his way of saying they're going to do everything they can, like you said in the intro, to get this contract done before he hits free agency and probably before even next season in this offseason period because, and we'll get into another quote from Shai Davidi, this is the most important offseason in recent memory for the Blue Jays. They have so many question marks regarding Bichette's contract, and more specifically, the face of their franchise, which is Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s contract. No matter who they sign in this upcoming offseason, they need to add bats, whether it's Pete Alonso, Teoscar Hernandez, even if it's Juan Soto. What the constant remains here is that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. needs to re-sign in Toronto for them to be competitive going forward. Bichette's still up in the air a little bit. It seems like he wants to stay too, but this is a very good sign, and it seems like they're going to try to get this done before the start of the next season in 2025, and I'm very happy that this is where it's come to. And the more reports that come out about this, the more I'm starting to feel comfortable. And especially when it's from Shai Davidi and not, I guess, Bob Nightingale, for example. Shai Davidi is a bit more, reputable for the Blue Jays. This is a very, very good sign.
Yes, it is. And another thing as well is that even if they don't make any subsequent moves in the offseason, keeping Vladdy around allows them to be competitive in years to come. Yeah. So I understand that you want to be competitive in 2025 and you want to surround him with the proper talent in order to go ahead and accomplish that. But let's say you don't. Let's say you strike out on numerous free agents in the offseason. If you keep Vladdy around, he's still only 25 years old. So if you sign him to a 10-year deal, you're getting 10 years of prime Vladdy Jr. And I think that will help you be competitive in the distant future as well. So even if you strike out on Juan Soto, on Alex Bregman, on Teoscar Hernandez, on whoever it is that you're going after this offseason, keeping Vladdy for a decade will allow you to add pieces in 2028 that will help you make the playoffs and regain some of that supremacy in the AL East. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. A lot of things need to change and a lot of prospects need to pan out in order for the Blue Jays to become one of the better teams in the American League East again. And I feel like next year we might be fooling ourselves to think that they're going to be competitive. I understand that there are some notable free agents that they can go after, but it hasn't been too kind to the Blue Jays going for those marquee free agents. So you're going to have to kind of hit the reset button, but you don't want to hit that reset button without having Vladdy locked up. And I think he can get behind sort of a retool situation. Like, you don't need to be competitive in 2025 to keep him around. He seems very happy. He's been very vocal about wanting to return to the Toronto Blue Jays. So keeping him in town for a decade will allow you to go after free agents, not just for next season, but for years after that and years after that. And I think that's the most important thing. You lay the foundation with Vladdy. He is your guy. He's established that this season, and then everything else just works around him, whether it's in 2025, whether it's in 2030. I think the Blue Jays position themselves well if they keep Vladdy in town.
Yeah, and obviously they've done a lot better since they've transitioned to the youth movement, but they're still not quite there. You've seen some prospects play very well, whether that's Spencer Horwitz, whether that's a lot of the other young guys that Toronto Blue Jays have called up, Will Wagner, even Joey Laperfito has played fairly well. So those are building blocks heading into next season. And he also had this comment, Shadavidi, about the front office. He said, we've said this a few times and talking to different people about it. I don't think we're being dramatic when we say this is one of the biggest turning points in franchise history coming up this winter with Shapiro's future along with Bo and Vladdy. And Shapiro's future is a conversation for another day. We'll have another video on that. But it is the biggest turning point in a very long time for the Blue Jays. And you look at Vladimir Guerrero Jr., we look at the game yesterday where Alejandro Kirk walked it off. Vladdy played very well. And then there's another question mark about, and Peter, you mentioned this in a video a couple days ago about him moving to third base if they really want to go all in on offense. They saw him with his 10th start of third base of the year, I believe 10th yesterday. And he played it very solid, and by very solid, if we're not talking about him playing third base, it means he did a pretty good job that night. There was no errors, there was no crazy conversations, and that's all you need from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at this point is just him playing a okay third base. He's one of the best hitters in baseball. He's like a top 5 hitter in baseball. Can be the top best hitter in baseball, has been for the past few months. But if he can play third base, that opens up a lot of things going forward. And not only does it open up things for him, it makes the contract a lot easier to swallow if you're the front office or even if you're a fan. We're fine with him giving him 320 million, whatever it takes to keep him at this point. But if he can play third at a decent level, and he's in really good shape right now, he has the confidence, it makes the team a lot better and easier to build around going forward. Because they still don't really have a set-in-stone third baseman yet, unless they go out and get Bregman in the offseason. There's not many options available there.
Look, I don't know if that's the long-term solution, having him at third base, but him being able to be there and be adequate defensively, I think that's a really big clincher as well. And like if we take a look at the Boston Red Sox, for example, they gave a ton of money to Rafael Devers, who is a third baseman right now, but he's not great defensively. So he's probably going to have to transition to first base towards the latter stages of that 10-year deal that he signed. But still, he got paid as a third baseman. And I think Vladdy being able to play that position and play it at a decent clip, I think that allows the Blue Jays to maybe give him a little bit more money, knowing that they have that in their back pocket. But I don't believe that is the ideal scenario to have him there for, let's say, 80 games a season. It definitely makes their offense better, but the Blue Jays have a pretty big focus on the defensive side of things, and I don't know if they'll let it slip that heavily by letting Vladdy go line up there night in, night out. But still, it's not a bad thing to have at your disposal, especially considering that he's played it pretty comfortably, and he looks better there with every passing game that goes by. So his arm is fantastic. No one is doubting that, but it's the glove and it's the footwork that maybe leave a little bit to be desired at that position. But if the Blue Jays go and get Alex Bregman, I think that answers a lot of question marks. And you have your third baseman and you have your first baseman, and then Horwitz can kind of be that utility Swiss Army knife that he has shown that he can be.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately at this point, there's a ton of questions heading into what is going to be over the next few weeks as this season wraps up, the biggest offseason in the past decade for the Toronto Blue Jays. And we'll keep you up to date with all of that. So make sure to hit the subscribe button. But thank you guys for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.